Welcome to Night Shift Hauntings. Before we check in tonight, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now get comfortable. The night shift is about to begin. My name is Rebecca Hayes, former night security officer at St. Mary's Regional Medical Center. I worked there for 6 years before transferring to a position in corporate healthcare security. This report is based on incident documentation, maintenance records, and security logs from a 2-month period between October and November 2019. The hospital administration classified these events as facilities maintenance issues, but the maintenance department found no mechanical problems with any of the systems involved. St. Mary's Regional Medical Center is a Catholic hospital built in 1956, with major renovations completed in 1998. The facility includes a chapel located on the 2nd floor, designed to serve patients, families, and staff members who wish to pray or participate in religious services. The chapel is non-denominational in practice, though it retains traditional Catholic architectural elements and religious imagery. Hospital policy requires that the chapel remain accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The space is never locked, ensuring that anyone needing spiritual comfort can access the facility at any time. This policy has been in effect since the hospital's founding and has never been modified or suspended. The chapel contains 12 wooden pews arranged in 2 sections, an altar area with religious symbols from multiple faiths, and a small alcove with votive candles that visitors can light for prayer or remembrance purposes. The candle alcove contains 48 individual candle holders arranged in 4 rows of 12 candles each. On October 18, 2019, during my routine 2:30 a.m. security patrol, I found that the chapel doors were closed and secured with a heavy chain and padlock. The chain appeared to be new, made of thick steel links, and the padlock was a heavy-duty model typically used for industrial security applications. This was highly unusual, as the chapel doors are never locked, and hospital policy explicitly requires constant access. I checked with the evening maintenance supervisor, David Stone, to determine if there had been scheduled security work or emergency repairs that might require temporary closure of the chapel. Stone confirmed that no maintenance work was scheduled for the chapel, no security upgrades had been authorized, and no staff member had reported installing chains or locks on the chapel doors. He had no knowledge of why the chapel would be secured, or who might have the authority to override the hospital's open access policy. I documented the situation and attempted to contact the hospital's chief administrator to report the policy violation. However, at 2:30 a.m., administrative staff were not available, and the night supervisors had no information about authorized chapel closure. Stone and I examined the chain and padlock installation more carefully. The chain had been threaded through the door handles and secured from the inside of the chapel, which meant that whoever had installed the security measures was still inside the chapel or had left through another exit. The chapel has only one entrance, the main doors that were chained shut. There are no windows large enough for human passage, no connecting doors to other rooms, and no other means of exit from the space. If someone had chained the doors from the inside, they should still be present in the chapel. Stone obtained bolt cutters from the maintenance department to remove the chain and padlock. When we cut through the chain and opened the chapel doors, we found the space completely empty. No people present, no signs of recent occupancy, no explanation for how someone could have installed the chain from inside and then left the sealed space. But we did notice unusual activity with the votive candles in the prayer alcove. Approximately 20 of the 48 candles were lit, which was not unusual in itself, as visitors throughout the day often light candles for prayer purposes. What was unusual was the pattern in which the lit candles were arranged. The illuminated candles formed distinct letter shapes when viewed from the chapel entrance. The pattern clearly spelled "help" across the first 2 rows of candles, with additional lit candles in the lower rows, forming what appeared to be US when viewed from the correct angle. Stone and I documented the candle pattern with photographs, then extinguished all the votive candles according to standard chapel maintenance procedures. We conducted a thorough search of the chapel to ensure no one was hiding in the space and that no equipment or furnishings had been disturbed. The chapel appeared normal in all other respects. Pews were properly arranged, altar area was undisturbed, religious materials were in their designated locations. The only anomaly was the chain and padlock that had secured the doors from the inside, and the deliberate pattern of lit candles spelling words in the prayer alcove. I filed an incident report documenting the unauthorized chapel closure and the unusual candle arrangement. The report was reviewed by the hospital security director, who recommended increased patrol frequency for the chapel area and notification of the maintenance department to monitor for any additional unauthorized modifications to the facility. On October 22nd, during my 1:15 a.m. patrol, I found the chapel doors chained shut again. Same type of chain, same heavy-duty padlock, same installation from inside the chapel that should have been impossible given the lack of alternative exits. This time, I immediately contacted Stone and requested that he respond with bolt cutters to remove the chain. While waiting for Stone's arrival, I observed the chapel through the small windows in the doors to see if anyone was visible inside the space. The chapel appeared empty, but all 48 votive candles were lit, creating significant illumination throughout the prayer alcove. The candles were arranged in a more complex pattern than during the previous incident. Instead of simple letter formation, the lit candles created what appeared to be a message spelled out across all 4 rows. Trapped here since construction. Stone arrived and cut through the chain. When we entered the chapel, we found it empty as before, but this time there were additional signs of occupancy. Several of the hymn books had been moved from their usual positions in the pew racks and were open to specific pages. All the opened books showed the same hymn, Abide With Me, a traditional song often sung at funerals or memorial services. We also found that the chapel's guest book, normally located near the entrance for visitors to sign, had new entries. 3 names were written in the book, all dated that same day. Mary Catherine Sullivan, Oct. 22, 1956. James Patrick O'Brien, Oct. 22, 1956. And Helen Margaret Walsh, Oct. 22, 1956. The dates were significant because October 22, 1956, was during the original construction period of St. Mary's Regional Medical Center. The hospital had opened in early 1957, but construction work continued throughout 1956. I researched the names in the guest book, using the hospital's historical records and local newspaper archives. All 3 individuals, Mary Catherine Sullivan, James Patrick O'Brien, and Helen Margaret Walsh, had been construction workers who died in an accident during the building of St. Mary's Hospital on October 22, 1956. According to newspaper reports from that time, the 3 workers had been trapped in a structural collapse while working on the 2nd floor of the hospital during construction. Rescue efforts continued for several days, but the workers could not be reached in time to save their lives. Their bodies were eventually recovered and buried in the local Catholic cemetery. The structural collapse had occurred in the area where the chapel was later built. The original construction plans had called for the chapel to be located on the 3rd floor, but after the accident, the design was modified to include a memorial chapel on the 2nd floor in the exact location where the workers had died. This information suggested that the chapel chains and candle messages might be related to the 3 construction workers who had died during the hospital's building. But it didn't explain how the doors could be chained from inside an empty room, or how votive candles could be arranged to spell messages without human intervention. On October 25th, I decided to conduct extended surveillance of the chapel to observe any unusual activity that might occur during the night hours. I positioned myself in the 2nd floor corridor with a clear view of the chapel doors. Beginning my observation at 1 a.m. At 1:45 a.m., I observed the chapel doors slowly closing, despite no one being present to close them. The doors moved smoothly and quietly, as if being drawn shut by invisible hands. After the doors were fully closed, I could hear sounds from inside. The chapel, metallic rattling that suggested chains being moved into position. I immediately approached the chapel doors and found them secured with the same chain and padlock arrangement as during previous incidents. The chain was warm to the touch, as if it had recently been handled, and the padlock showed fresh scratches around the keyhole. Through the chapel door windows, I could see that the votive candles were beginning to light themselves. One by one, candles throughout the prayer alcove ignited without any visible flame source. The candles lit in a specific sequence, creating letters and words as the illumination spread across the rows of candle holders. This time, the candle message was longer and more detailed. "We are still here, building never finished, work continues. Help us complete the construction." I documented this observation with photographs and video recordings, capturing the self-lighting candles and the message they formed. I also recorded the sounds coming from inside the chapel, not just the metallic rattling of chains, but also what appeared to be construction work. Hammering, sawing, and other tool sounds, suggesting that building activities were taking place inside the sealed chapel. When Stone arrived to cut the chain, we found evidence supporting the construction activity sounds I had recorded. Several of the chapel pews had been moved to create an open work area in the center of the space. Tools were scattered around the work area, hammers, saws, levels, and other construction implements that were not part of the chapel's normal furnishings. The tools appeared to be vintage models from the 1950s, consistent with the equipment that would have been used during the hospital's original construction. They showed signs of recent use: sawdust on the blades, hammer marks on the handles, and other evidence of active construction work. Most significantly, we found construction blueprints spread across the altar area. The blueprints showed detailed plans for the chapel, but not as it currently existed. The plans depicted a larger, more elaborate chapel with additional rooms, extended altar space, and architectural features that had never been built. The blueprints were dated October 1956 and bore the signatures of Mary Catherine Sullivan, James, Patrick O'Brien, and Helen Margaret Walsh, the three construction workers who had died during the hospital's building. Stone contacted the hospital's architectural firm to verify the authenticity of the blueprints we had found. The firm confirmed that the blueprints matched original construction documents from 1956, but represented a version of the chapel that had been eliminated from the final building plans due to budget constraints and the construction accident that had occurred. According to the architectural firm, the elaborate chapel shown in the blueprints had never been built. The current chapel was a simplified version, installed after the construction accident as a memorial to the workers who had died. The original, more complex design had been abandoned and was not part of the hospital's final construction. But the blueprints in the chapel were marked with modifications and updates, as if construction work on the original design was continuing. New measurements, revised specifications, and detailed notes were written in the margins of the blueprints, all in handwriting that matched samples from the three deceased workers' construction logs. The hospital administration reviewed my reports and the physical evidence we had collected from the chapel incidents. Their conclusion was that the situation represented facilities maintenance issues requiring specialized attention, and that normal chapel operations should continue with additional monitoring for equipment malfunctions. I was directed to log all chapel incidents as mechanical faults and to coordinate with the maintenance department for any equipment repairs or adjustments that might be needed. The chains, padlocks, tools, and blueprints were removed from the chapel and stored in the hospital's administrative offices. But the chapel incidents continued with increasing frequency. Every few nights I would find the doors chained from the inside, votive candles spelling messages, and evidence of construction work being conducted in the sealed space. Each time, the messages became more specific about the work that needed to be completed and the construction projects that remained unfinished. On November 15th, my final night working at St. Mary's Regional Medical Center, the chapel incident was different from all previous occurrences. Instead of finding the doors chained shut, I found them wide open, with all the lights inside turned on brightly. The chapel had been completely transformed. Instead of the simple memorial space that had existed since 1957, the chapel now matched the elaborate design shown in the 1956 blueprints: extended altar area, additional rooms, architectural features that had never been part of the original construction, all present and fully built. The three construction workers, Mary Catherine Sullivan, James Patrick O'Brien, and Helen Margaret Walsh, were standing near the altar area, wearing 1950s work clothes and holding the tools they had been using during their construction work. They appeared solid, real, and completely present in the transformed chapel. "Thank you for helping us finish the work," Mary Catherine said. The chapel is finally built according to the original plans. James Patrick nodded toward the elaborate altar area and extended rooms. Took us 63 years to complete the construction, but we got it done right. Helen Margaret smiled and added, "Now we can rest. The building is finally finished the way it was supposed to be." I tried to respond, to ask questions about how they had accomplished the construction work, but when I spoke, no sound came from my voice. The three workers waved goodbye and walked toward the extended altar area, disappearing into the architectural features that had never existed in the hospital's original construction. When I returned to the chapel the next morning to file my final report, the space had returned to its normal configuration. Simple memorial chapel, standard furnishings, no sign of the elaborate construction that I had observed during the night. But the guest book contained a new entry signed by all three construction workers and dated November 15, 2019. Construction completed. Memorial chapel finished according to original specifications. Thank you for your patience during the building process. I've learned that some construction projects continue long after the original workers have finished their shifts, and sometimes the most important building work happens during the hours when no one is supposed to be working. My name is Mark Stevens, and I worked as a security supervisor at Mercy General Hospital for 11 years before taking early retirement. This account documents events that occurred over a 6-week period from September through October 2020, based on security logs, patrol schedules, and communication records that were later classified as administrative review pending. Mercy General Hospital is a 3-story facility built in 1979 with a basement level for mechanical systems and storage. The building layout has remained unchanged since construction. Basement level, first floor emergency and outpatient services, second floor surgical and medical units, third floor administrative offices and conference rooms, and roof access for mechanical equipment maintenance. The hospital has never had a 4th floor. The building's architectural plans, construction records, and all official documentation consistently show a 3-story structure with basement and roof access. This has been verified multiple times for insurance purposes, building inspections, and renovation planning. As security supervisor, I was responsible for creating daily patrol schedules for the security staff, ensuring that all areas of the hospital were regularly monitored during each shift. The patrol schedules were generated using a computer system that automatically populated required checkpoints and timing based on hospital layout and security protocols. On September 3, 2020, while reviewing the night shift patrol schedule, I noticed an entry that shouldn't have been there. 4th floor patrol, 2 a.m. Check all rooms and corridors. The entry appeared in the standard format used by our scheduling system, with proper timestamp and location codes, but it referenced a floor that didn't exist in our facility. I assumed this was a data entry error, possibly a remnant from a template used for a different hospital with more floors. I deleted the entry and submitted the corrected patrol schedule to the night security staff. The following day, September 4th, the same entry appeared in the patrol schedule. 4th floor patrol, 2 a.m. Check all rooms and corridors. I deleted it again and contacted the IT department to report what appeared to be a recurring error in the scheduling system. The IT technician, David Park, reviewed the scheduling software and found no problems with the system. According to his analysis, the software was properly configured for Mercy General's 3-story layout, and there were no templates or settings that would generate entries for a 4th floor. Park suggested that someone might be manually adding the 4th floor entries, either as a prank or due to confusion about the hospital's layout. He recommended that I monitor the system more closely to determine when and how the entries were being added. On September 5th, I observed the scheduling system throughout the day to watch for any unauthorized modifications. No one accessed the system to add 4th floor patrol entries, but when I generated the night shift schedule at the end of the day, the entry appeared automatically. 4th floor patrol, 2 a.m. Check all rooms and corridors. The system logs showed that the entry had been present in the schedule template all along, but it hadn't been visible during my previous reviews. According to the logs, The fourth floor patrol had been part of the standard schedule for several months, though I had no memory of seeing it before September 3rd. I called the night security officer, Janet Miller, to inform her that the fourth floor patrol entry should be ignored since there was no fourth floor to patrol. Miller acknowledged the instruction and confirmed that she would skip that assignment during her rounds. At 2:15 a.m. on September 6th, I received a phone call at home from my supervisor, Director Harold Walsh. Walsh asked why the fourth floor patrol had been missed during the night shift and expressed concern about security protocol compliance. "Mark," Walsh said, "the 2 a.m. fourth floor patrol wasn't completed last night. The system shows it as overdue." "What happened?" I explained that I had instructed Officer Miller to skip the fourth floor patrol because Mercy General doesn't have a fourth floor. There was a long pause before Walsh responded. "What do you mean we don't have a fourth floor?" Walsh asked. His voice sounded confused and somewhat shaken. "I've been walking through the fourth floor for years. Patient rooms, nursing stations, storage areas. It's all there." I reminded Walsh about the hospital's 3-story layout, the architectural plans and the building records showing no fourth floor. Walsh seemed genuinely puzzled by this information. "That can't be right," Walsh said. "I have meetings in the fourth floor conference room every Tuesday. I've been doing that for 3 years. How can you say there's no fourth floor?" The conversation became increasingly strange as Walsh described in detail the layout of the fourth floor. Patient rooms numbered 401 through 425, 2 nursing stations, a medication room, physical therapy area, and conference facilities. His descriptions were specific and consistent, as if he was familiar with a floor that didn't exist. But what was most unsettling about the conversation was that Walsh's voice was shaking, as if he was frightened by the implications of what we were discussing. He kept insisting that the fourth floor existed, while simultaneously seeming disturbed by his own certainty about something that contradicted the hospital's known structure. "They say," call ended abruptly when Walsh said he needed to physically check the fourth floor to resolve the confusion. He hung up before I could suggest that we meet at the hospital to review the building layout together. The next morning, September 6th, I arrived at work early to investigate the fourth floor situation with Director Walsh. When I checked with his secretary, she told me that Walsh had called in sick and wouldn't be in the office that day. I attempted to contact Walsh by phone, but his calls went directly to voicemail. His voicemail message was unusual. Instead of the standard professional greeting, the message was Walsh's voice saying, "I'm currently investigating discrepancies in building layout documentation. Please leave detailed information about any floor-related concerns, and I'll respond once I've completed my structural review." This was not typical language for a hospital administrator's voicemail message, and it suggested that Walsh was continuing to pursue the fourth floor question, despite the apparent impossibility of the situation, decided to physically investigate the area above the third floor to determine if there was any structural possibility for additional space that might explain Walsh's certainty about a fourth floor. I accessed the roof level through the standard maintenance entrance and examined the building's upper structure. The space above the third floor contained only mechanical equipment, ventilation systems, and roof access structures. There was no evidence of floor space, patient rooms, or any of the facilities that Walsh had described. The building's roofline and structural elements clearly indicated that the third floor was the highest occupied level of the facility. But while examining the roof area, I found something that didn't match my expectations. A maintenance access door that I had never noticed before, labeled fourth floor mechanical. The door was secured with a standard lock, and my master key opened it normally. Behind the door was a stairwell that descended into the building. The stairwell was properly lit and maintained, with standard hospital construction and finishing. The stairs led down to a landing with another door labeled fourth floor authorized personnel only. I opened the second door and found myself in a corridor that matched Walsh's descriptions exactly. Patient room doors numbered 401 through 425, nursing station with standard medical equipment, medication room, physical therapy area, and conference facilities. The fourth floor appeared to be a fully functional hospital unit, complete with patient rooms that were currently occupied. Through the patient room windows, I could see individuals in hospital beds, some connected to medical equipment, others sitting up and appearing alert. The nursing station was staffed with people, wearing hospital scrubs who appeared to be conducting normal medical duties, but when I approached the nursing station to identify myself and ask about the fourth floor operations, the staff members didn't acknowledge my presence. They continued their work, checking charts, monitoring equipment, administering medications, as if I wasn't there. I attempted to speak with the nursing staff, but they showed no reaction to my voice. I tried waving to get their attention, but they didn't respond to my gestures. It was as if I was invisible to the people working on the fourth floor. I entered one of the patient rooms to investigate further. The room contained a patient who appeared to be recovering from surgery, with appropriate monitoring equipment and medical care set up. The patient was awake and seemed comfortable, but like the nursing staff, showed no awareness of my presence. I examined the patient's chart and medical records. The documentation appeared normal and complete, showing admission dates, treatment plans, medication schedules, and all the standard information expected for hospital patients. But the admission dates were all from the 1980s and 1990s, decades before the current date. According to the medical records, the patients on the fourth floor had been receiving care for 20 to 30 years, with treatment plans that had been continuously updated throughout that time. The records showed consistent medical care, regular physician visits, and ongoing treatment for conditions that should have been resolved or resulted in discharge years earlier. I spent approximately 2 hours exploring the fourth floor, documenting the layout, photographing the facilities, and reviewing patient records. The floor appeared to be a fully operational hospital unit with long-term patients receiving ongoing medical care from a dedicated staff. But when I attempted to leave the fourth floor through the same stairwell I had used to enter, I found that the exit door was locked from the inside. My master key, which had opened the door when I entered, no longer worked. I was trapped on a floor that officially didn't exist. I radioed the main security desk to request assistance, but my radio received no response. The radio appeared to be functioning normally, but no communications were getting through to the hospital's security systems. I decided to explore the fourth floor more thoroughly to find alternative exits or communication methods. During this extended exploration, I discovered that the fourth floor was much larger than should have been possible given the hospital's known structure. The corridor system on the fourth floor included wings and sections that extended beyond the building's exterior walls. Patient rooms, medical facilities, and support areas continued into spaces that should have been outside the hospital's footprint. The fourth floor seemed to occupy more physical space than the rest of the hospital combined. At 6:30 p.m., approximately 8 hours after I had entered the fourth floor, I heard my name being called over the floor's public address system. Mark Stevens, please report to the fourth floor nursing station immediately. I returned to the nursing station, where I found Director Walsh waiting for me. Walsh appeared normal and professional, but he was wearing hospital scrubs instead of his usual administrative attire. Mark, Walsh said, I've been looking for you all day. Why didn't you complete the fourth floor patrol last night? I explained that I had been exploring the fourth floor for several hours, trying to understand how it could exist when the hospital's records showed only 3 floors. Walsh listened to my explanation with a concerned expression. Mark, Walsh said, there's been some confusion about the building layout. The fourth floor has always been part of Mercy General. It's our long-term care unit for patients who require extended medical supervision. Walsh showed me documentation that confirmed the fourth floor's existence, building plans that included the fourth floor layout, patient census reports showing fourth floor occupancy, and staffing schedules for fourth floor medical personnel. All the documentation appeared official and properly formatted, but the documentation was dated from the 1980s through the current time, suggesting that the fourth floor had been in continuous operation for decades. This contradicted my memory of the hospital's 3-story structure and all the building records I had previously reviewed. Walsh escorted me to the exit stairwell, which was now unlocked and accessible. As we walked through the fourth floor corridors, he pointed out various facilities and explained the units, operations as if he had been familiar with them for years. The fourth floor serves patients who need long-term care but don't require intensive medical intervention, Walsh explained. They've been with us for years, some for decades. It's a specialized program that operates somewhat independently from the main hospital services. When I exited the fourth floor and returned to the main hospital levels, everything appeared normal. The security office, staff areas, and patient floors were exactly as I remembered them. But my patrol schedule for that day showed that I had completed the fourth floor patrol on time, with all checkpoints documented as normal. My radio communications had been logged as regular check-ins throughout the day, showing continuous contact with the security desk during the hours when I thought I had been unable to communicate. According to the official records, I had conducted routine security duties all day without any problems or unusual incidents, submitted a report documenting my discovery of the fourth floor and the apparent discrepancies in the hospital's building records. The report was reviewed and filed as building orientation. Information updated with a note that fourth floor patrol duties would continue as scheduled. But the most disturbing aspect of the entire situation was that I gradually began to remember the fourth floor as if it had always been part of my regular duties. Within a week, I had clear memories of conducting fourth floor patrols for years, being familiar with the long-term care patients, and working with the specialized medical staff who operated the unit. My patrol schedules, security logs, and all other documentation showed continuous fourth floor duties dating back to my original employment at Mercy General. The records indicated that I had been patrolling the fourth floor regularly for 11 years, though I had only become aware of its existence on September 3, 2020. I accepted early retirement from Mercy General shortly after the fourth floor incident. But during my exit interview, the Human Resources Director thanked me for my dedicated service to the fourth floor long-term care unit and mentioned that the patients and staff had specifically requested to express their appreciation for my years of reliable security coverage. I've learned that some buildings have floors that exist only when they're needed, and sometimes the most important patrol routes are the ones that don't appear on official building plans. My name is Daniel Foster, and I was the night security coordinator at Regional Medical Center's Laboratory Division for 7 years before transferring to day shift administrative work. This report documents a series of incidents that occurred between November 2019 and February 2020, based on security footage, inventory logs, and laboratory documentation that was eventually classified as internal investigation pending. Regional Medical Center's Blood Bank operates a specialized storage facility that maintains blood products and samples under precise temperature and security controls. The facility includes multiple refrigeration units, freezer systems, and secured storage areas that require keycard access and biometric identification for entry. The main blood storage cooler is a walk-in refrigeration unit approximately 12 feet by 8 feet, maintained at a constant temperature of 4 degrees Celsius. The cooler stores blood products for transfusion, laboratory samples for testing, and research materials that require cold storage. Access to the cooler is restricted to authorized laboratory personnel and is monitored by security cameras and access control systems. The cooler's security system logs all entries and exits, recording the time, duration, and identity of each person who accesses the facility. Keycard scans and biometric verification ensure that only authorized personnel can enter the storage area, and the system maintains detailed records of all access activity. On November 12, 2019, during routine morning inventory procedures, Laboratory Supervisor Dr. Catherine Wells reported that several blood samples had disappeared from the main storage cooler overnight. The missing samples included various blood types collected for routine testing, compatibility screening, and research purposes. The missing samples were significant because they represented materials that had been specifically allocated for patient care and research projects. The loss of these samples could delay medical procedures and compromise ongoing laboratory studies. Dr. Wells reviewed the access control logs for the previous evening and found no record of authorized personnel entering the blood storage cooler after 6:30 p.m. Hence, when the day shift had completed their final inventory and secured the facility for the night. I was contacted to review the security camera footage for the blood storage area to determine if the missing samples could be explained by unauthorized access or equipment malfunction. The security cameras monitoring the blood storage cooler showed normal activity during day shift operations, with laboratory personnel accessing the facility for routine sample collection and storage procedures. The cameras showed the cooler being properly secured at the end of the day shift, with all personnel exiting and the access doors being locked according to protocol. But at 2:47 a.m., the cameras recorded unusual activity. While the cooler access door remained closed and the security system showed no keycard scans or biometric verifications, the interior camera inside the cooler detected movement. The interior camera showed a gloved hand reaching into the sample storage racks and removing specific blood samples. The hand appeared to be wearing standard laboratory gloves, but was extremely pale, almost white in coloration. The hand moved with purpose, selecting particular samples while leaving others undisturbed. The hand was visible for approximately 30 seconds as it collected samples from different storage areas within the cooler. But the exterior cameras showed no one entering or exiting the cooler, and the access control system recorded no activity during the time period when the theft occurred. This created an impossible situation. The interior camera clearly showed someone accessing the blood samples, but all other monitoring systems indicated that no one had entered the cooler. I reviewed the footage multiple times and enhanced the image quality to get better detail of the gloved hand. The enhancement revealed that the hand appeared to be moving independently, without any visible arm or body attached to it. The hand floated through the cooler interior, reaching into storage areas and collecting samples without any apparent support structure. Dr. Wells and I conducted a physical inspection of the blood storage cooler to look for any structural problems that might explain how someone could access the interior without triggering the security systems. We checked for hidden panels, ceiling, access points, ventilation openings, or any other means by which someone might enter the cooler without using the main access door. The cooler was structurally sound with no alternative access points. The walls, ceiling, and floor were solid construction with no openings large enough for human passage. The ventilation system consisted of small ducts that could not accommodate human entry. The cooler could only be accessed through the main door, which was monitored by multiple security systems. On November 15th, the same pattern occurred. Missing blood samples, no record of authorized access, and security footage showing the pale, gloved hand collecting materials from inside the cooler, while the exterior cameras showed no human activity. This time I decided to monitor the blood storage area in person during the night shift to observe any unusual activity directly. I positioned myself in the laboratory corridor with a clear view of the cooler access door, beginning my observation at 11 Panon P. At 2:47 a.m., exactly the same time as the previous incident, I observed the interior cooler camera on my portable monitor, showing the gloved hand accessing blood samples. But I was looking directly at the cooler access door, which remained closed and showed no signs of being opened. The access control system was silent, indicating no keycard scans or biometric verifications. The cooler door's magnetic lock remained engaged, and the door handle showed no movement. Yet the interior camera clearly showed someone inside the cooler collecting blood samples. I immediately approached the cooler door and attempted to open it using my security override access. The door was properly locked and secured. When I opened it and entered the cooler, I found no one inside, but several blood samples were missing from the storage racks exactly as shown in the security footage. The temperature inside the cooler was normal. The storage equipment was undisturbed, and there were no signs of unauthorized presence except for the missing blood samples. Dr. Wells contacted the hospital administration to report what appeared to be a serious security breach involving theft of medical materials. The administration ordered a comprehensive security review of the blood storage facility and authorized installation of additional monitoring equipment. Enhanced security measures were implemented, including motion sensors inside the cooler, additional cameras with improved resolution, and upgraded access control systems that required dual verification for entry. The new systems were designed to detect any presence or activity inside the cooler, regardless of how access was gained. On November 20th, with all the enhanced security systems active, The blood sample theft occurred again. The new motion sensors detected activity inside the cooler at 247A. Timosen, but the access control systems showed no entry. The enhanced cameras captured clearer footage of the gloved hand, revealing additional disturbing details. The enhanced footage showed that the gloved hand was not only pale, but appeared to be translucent in some areas. The hand seemed to phase through solid surfaces, reaching into sealed storage containers and removing samples without opening the container's lids. The hand also demonstrated knowledge of the storage system that suggested familiarity with laboratory procedures. It selected specific blood types, avoided contaminated samples, and chose materials that were allocated for particular medical procedures. This wasn't random theft, but selective collection by someone with detailed knowledge of the blood bank's operations. I consulted with Dr. Wells about the possibility that the thefts were being conducted by someone with legitimate access to the facility who was somehow bypassing or defeating the security systems. We reviewed the access records for all authorized personnel and found no anomalies or suspicious patterns. All laboratory staff had proper clearances, no history of policy violations, and alibis for the times when the thefts were occurring. Most importantly, none of the authorized personnel had the ability to phase through solid surfaces or appear as disembodied hands on security cameras. Dr. Wells suggested that we attempt to communicate with whoever was accessing the blood samples to determine their purpose and potentially negotiate a resolution to the thefts. She recommended leaving a note inside the cooler, requesting that the person identify themselves and explain their need for the blood samples. On November 25th, we placed a handwritten note inside the cooler. We know you are accessing blood samples from this facility. Please identify yourself and explain your requirements. We may be able to arrange authorized access if you have legitimate medical needs. The note was positioned where the gloved hand typically appeared during the 2:47 a.m. incidents. We observed the cooler through security cameras to see if the note would receive any response. At 2:47 a.m., the gloved hand appeared as usual and immediately went to the location where we had placed the note. The hand picked up the note, appeared to read it, then set it back down. The hand then proceeded to collect blood samples as during previous incidents. When we checked the cooler the next morning, we found that our note had been replaced with a different message, written in handwriting that appeared to be from the same hand we had observed on the security cameras. Requirements are medical. Access through conventional means not possible. Samples needed for patient care that cannot be provided through normal hospital procedures. The response suggested that whoever was taking the blood samples was attempting to provide medical care to patients who couldn't access regular hospital services. But the note didn't explain the apparent ability to phase through solid surfaces or access secured areas without triggering security systems. Dr. Wells and I decided to leave additional supplies in the cooler that might be useful for medical purposes. Syringes, collection tubes, bandages, and other materials that might be needed for patient care. If the person was indeed providing medical assistance, these supplies might be helpful and could demonstrate our willingness to cooperate. The additional supplies were collected along with the blood samples during the next incident. But this time, the gloved hand left behind used medical materials, empty syringes, contaminated collection tubes, and blood-stained bandages. The used materials suggested that the collected samples were indeed being used for medical procedures. Laboratory analysis of the contaminated materials revealed blood types that didn't match any of the samples that had been taken from storage. The blood on the used materials belonged to individuals who were not patients at Regional Medical Center and whose blood types weren't represented in our current inventory. This suggested that the person accessing our blood storage was treating patients who were not part of the hospital's official patient population. The medical procedures appeared to be legitimate. Proper collection and transfusion techniques, appropriate handling of blood products, standard medical protocols, but were being conducted outside the hospital's normal patient care systems. On December 10th, I decided to attempt direct communication with the person during their 2:47 a.m. access to the blood storage cooler. I positioned myself inside the cooler before the scheduled time, hoping to meet the person face to face and discuss their medical requirements. At 2:47 a.m., while I was sitting inside the cooler, the gloved hand appeared as usual. But instead of collecting blood samples immediately, the hand paused and appeared to notice my presence. The hand gestured toward me, pointing and making motions that seemed to indicate surprise at finding someone in the cooler. I attempted to speak to the person, asking who they were and offering to help with their medical needs through official channels, but my voice produced no sound. I could feel myself speaking, but no audio was generated. The cooler remained completely silent despite my attempts to communicate verbally. The gloved hand approached me and touched my shoulder. The touch was cold, much colder than the cooler's refrigerated environment, and created a sensation of numbness that spread through my arm. But the touch also seemed to establish some form of communication. Without hearing any voice, I suddenly understood information about the person accessing the blood storage. The individual was a former laboratory technician who had worked at Regional Medical Center in the 1980s. She had died in a car accident while transporting blood samples to an emergency patient and had never completed that final delivery. The former technician continued to access the blood storage facility to collect samples needed for patients who existed in the same state as herself, individuals who had died before receiving medical treatment they required. She was providing posthumous medical care to people who had passed away while waiting for blood transfusions, surgical procedures, or other treatments that might have saved their lives. The blood samples were being used in a parallel medical facility that existed alongside the regular hospital, serving patients who had died but whose medical needs remained unresolved. The facility operated according to the same professional standards as the living hospital, but provided care to individuals who continued to require treatment after death. The former technician's message concluded with a request that the blood sample collection be allowed to continue, as it served patients who had no other means of receiving the medical care they needed. The parallel facility operated independently and posed no threat to the living hospital's operations or patients. The communication ended when the former technician collected the blood samples she needed and departed through whatever means allowed her to access the secured cooler. I remained in the cooler for another hour, but no further contact occurred. I submitted a report documenting the communication and recommending that the blood sample collection be permitted to continue under informal monitoring. The hospital administration reviewed the report and classified it as internal investigation, pending, with instructions to maintain security monitoring, but not to interfere with the collection activities. The blood sample collection continued throughout my remaining time working night security at Regional Medical Center. The pattern remained consistent. Samples collected at 2:47 a.m. by the pale, gloved hand, no conventional access to the cooler, and evidence that the samples were being used for legitimate medical purposes. The laboratory staff eventually adjusted their inventory procedures to account for the regular collection, ordering additional blood supplies to ensure that the parallel medical activities didn't impact care for living patients. It transferred to day shift administrative work in February 2020, primarily because I had become uncomfortable with the knowledge that the hospital's facilities were being used to provide medical care to individuals who existed in a state between life and death. My replacement in night security, Officer Jennifer Walsh, reported similar observations during her first week on the job. But she also noted that the gloved hand had begun leaving thank you notes along with the used medical materials, expressing gratitude for the hospital's cooperation in allowing the blood sample collection to continue. I've learned that some medical facilities serve patients who exist beyond the boundaries of conventional life and death, and sometimes the most important patient care happens during hours when no living person is scheduled to be working. My name is Jennifer Walsh, and I worked as a night security officer at Riverside Psychiatric Hospital for 4 years before requesting transfer to a general medical facility. This account is based on security logs, medical records, and maintenance documentation covering a 6-month period from March through August 2021. The hospital administration classified these observations as routine monitoring of vacant facilities, but the facilities were far from vacant. Riverside Psychiatric Hospital was built in 1968 as a comprehensive mental health treatment center. The facility consists of 4 main wings: administrative, Wing A; outpatient services, Wing B; inpatient treatment, Wing C; and specialized care, Wing D. Each wing is designed for specific types of psychiatric care, with appropriate security measures and specialized equipment for different patient populations. Wing D, the specialized care unit, was designed for patients requiring intensive psychiatric intervention and long-term treatment. The wing contains 24 individual patient rooms, common areas for group therapy and recreation, medical facilities for psychiatric medication management, and specialized security systems appropriate for patients who might pose risks to themselves or others. According to hospital records, Wing D was closed for major renovations in 2018 due to outdated infrastructure and the need to upgrade medical equipment and security systems. The renovation project was expected to take 18 months, with the wing scheduled to reopen in late 2019. However, funding issues and construction delays had extended the closure indefinitely. During my night shift patrols, Wing D was supposed to be completely vacant. The wing was secured with locked access doors, and all utilities except basic lighting and ventilation had been shut down during the renovation period. No patients, staff, or maintenance personnel were scheduled to be in Wing D during night hours. On March 8, 2021, during my routine 1:30 a.m. patrol, I passed through the corridor that provides access to Wing D. The wing's main entrance was secured as expected, but I noticed something unusual about the atmosphere around the closed unit. The area around Wing D was completely silent. Not just quiet in the way that empty buildings are quiet, but absolutely silent. No background sounds, no ventilation noise, no settling sounds that buildings typically make. The silence was so complete that it seemed to absorb sound from the surrounding areas. Even more unusual was the effect this silence had on my own movements. As I approached Wing D, my footsteps became muted, my radio static faded, and even my breathing seemed to produce no audible sound. It was as if the closed wing was creating a sound vacuum that eliminated all acoustic activity in its vicinity. I documented this observation in my patrol log and continued my rounds. But throughout the remainder of that shift, I found myself returning to the Wing D area to experience the unusual silence. The phenomenon was consistent, complete absence of sound whenever I was within approximately 50 feet of the closed wing's entrance. On March 12th, I decided to investigate the silence more thoroughly by testing various sound sources near Wing D. I brought a portable radio, flashlight with audio alerts, and other equipment that would normally produce clear sounds. All audio devices became completely silent when brought within the affected area around Wing D. The portable radio showed normal reception and appeared to be playing music, but no sound was audible. The flashlight's audio alerts activated visually, but produced no sound. Even dropping my keychain on the floor created no audible impact. But while testing the sound equipment, I noticed movement behind the windows of Wing D's patient rooms. Silhouettes of people moving within the rooms, pacing back and forth, sitting and standing, gesturing as if engaged in conversation. The movement suggested that Wing D was occupied by patients despite its official closure for renovation. I contacted the night nursing supervisor, Patricia Stone, to report the apparent occupancy of Wing D. Stone confirmed that Wing D had been closed for renovation since 2018, and that no patients, staff, or authorized personnel should be present in the wing during night hours. Stone accompanied me to Wing D to investigate the movement I had observed. When we approached the wing together, the silence phenomenon affected both of us. Our conversation became inaudible, our footsteps produced no sound, and the entire area around Wing D remained acoustically dead. Stone could also observe the silhouettes moving behind the windows of Wing D's patient rooms. The figures appeared to be engaged in typical psychiatric unit activities, some pacing in individual rooms, others gathering in common areas, some interacting with staff members who were also visible as silhouettes. "This doesn't make sense," Stone whispered, though her whisper produced no audible sound. "Wing D has been empty for 3 years. There's no power for lighting, no staff assigned, no patients admitted. but I can clearly see people moving around in there. We attempted to gain access to Wing D through the main entrance, but found that Stone's administrative keycard would not open the secured doors. The access control system appeared to be inactive, showing no response to keycard scans or manual entry attempts. Stone contacted the maintenance department to request access to Wing D for emergency investigation of possible unauthorized occupancy. The overnight maintenance supervisor, Robert Hayes, responded with keys for the wing's mechanical access points. When Hayes arrived, he was also affected by the silence phenomenon around Wing D, but he expressed confusion about our request for access to the wing. Wing D isn't closed for renovation, Hayes said. Although we couldn't hear his words, we somehow understood his communication, despite the absence of audible sound. Wing D has been operating normally for years. I do maintenance work there every week. Hayes showed us maintenance logs indicating regular service calls, equipment repairs, and facility upkeep for Wing D throughout the period when the wing was supposedly closed. According to his records, Wing D maintained a full patient census and required ongoing maintenance support for active psychiatric treatment operations. But when Hayes attempted to use his access keys to open Wing D's main entrance, the doors remained locked. His keys, which according to his log should have provided full access to the wing, were ineffective on the security systems. Hayes contacted his supervisor to report the access problem and request additional technical support for the Wing D entry systems. But when he placed the call using his radio, no communication was transmitted. The radio appeared to function normally, but produced no sound and received no response. Stone decided that the situation required immediate administrative review and emergency protocols for potential unauthorized occupancy of a closed medical facility. She attempted to contact hospital administration and security supervisors, but found that all communication devices were affected by the silence phenomenon when used near Wing D. We moved away from Wing D to an area where normal sound and communication were possible. From this location, Stone contacted hospital administration to report the unusual situation and request immediate investigation. The emergency response included additional security personnel, administrative supervisors, and maintenance staff equipped with override access systems for Wing D. The response team arrived within 30 minutes, but when they approached Wing D, they were also affected by the silence phenomenon. The administrative supervisor, Director Michael Park, attempted to access Wing D using emergency override procedures, but the electronic access systems appeared to be operating on different protocols than expected. Instead of the renovation closure settings that should have been active, the systems indicated normal operational status for an active psychiatric treatment unit. According to the access control system, Wing D was currently housing 22 patients under the care of a full medical staff. The system showed recent keycard access by doctors, nurses, and other personnel throughout the evening shift. Patient monitoring systems indicated normal vital signs and medication compliance for all residents, but none of the hospital's current staff members were assigned to Wing D, and no patients were officially admitted to the closed wing. The electronic systems were reporting a fully operational psychiatric unit that didn't correspond to the hospital's actual patient census or staffing assignments. Director Park decided to conduct a comprehensive physical inspection of Wing D using master override systems that would open all access points regardless of electronic security settings. The inspection team included security officers, medical supervisors, and maintenance personnel with equipment to document whatever they found inside the closed wing. When the master override systems opened Wing D's main entrance, the inspection team found a fully operational psychiatric treatment facility. Patient rooms were occupied by individuals receiving appropriate medical care. Common areas contained patients engaged in therapy activities, and nursing stations were staffed with medical personnel providing standard psychiatric services. But the patients and staff in Wing D showed no awareness of the inspection team. The psychiatric unit continued normal operations as if the inspection team wasn't present. Patients continued their activities, staff performed their duties, and all aspects of psychiatric treatment proceeded without any acknowledgement of the additional people who had entered the wing. Director Park attempted to speak with the medical staff operating Wing D, but received no response. The staff members appeared to be conducting normal psychiatric treatment procedures, but didn't react to questions or attempts at communication from the inspection team. When Director Park examined patient records at the Wing D nursing station, he found documentation for 22 patients who had been receiving psychiatric treatment continuously since 2018. The records showed detailed treatment plans, medication management, therapy notes, and all the standard documentation expected for active psychiatric patients. But the patients documented in Wing D's records were individuals who had been discharged from Riverside Psychiatric Hospital years earlier. Some had completed treatment programs and returned to community living. Others had been transferred to different facilities. Several had died while receiving psychiatric care at other hospitals. According to the medical records in Wing D, these former patients had never left the unit. Their treatment had continued uninterrupted since their original admission to Riverside Psychiatric Hospital, with ongoing therapy, medication adjustments, and progress notes dated through the current time. The inspection team spent 4 hours documenting the operational Wing D facility and attempting to understand how a closed renovation area could contain active psychiatric treatment operations for patients who were no longer officially hospitalized. During the inspection, the silence phenomenon gradually affected the team members differently. Some maintained normal hearing and communication abilities throughout the visit. Others experienced varying degrees of acoustic dampening, with sound becoming increasingly muted the longer they remained in Wing D. But most disturbing was the discovery that several inspection team members began to appear in Wing D's patient records. During the final hour of the inspection, patient charts were updated to include information about team members as if they were newly admitted psychiatric patients requiring evaluation and treatment. Director Park's chart showed an admission date matching the time of the inspection, with preliminary psychiatric assessment notes describing anxiety symptoms related to reality perception, difficulties, and recommended medication for administrative stress disorder. When the inspection team attempted to leave Wing D, they found that the exit doors were locked from the inside. The same master override systems that had provided entry to the wing were ineffective for departure. Several team members required additional time to locate alternative exits, and 2 members chose to remain in Wing D to continue patient care duties that appeared in their newly created medical records. I was among the inspection team members who successfully exited Wing D, but the experience fundamentally changed my understanding of the hospital's operations. Wing D continued to function as an active psychiatric treatment facility, despite its official closure, serving patients who existed in a state between discharge and continued care. Following the inspection, hospital administration implemented new protocols for Wing D monitoring that acknowledged the wing's parallel operational status. Security patrols were modified to include observation of Wing D's activities without attempting to enter or interfere with the psychiatric treatment operations. The silence phenomenon around Wing D became a permanent feature of the area, creating an acoustic buffer zone that separated the parallel psychiatric operations from the hospital's regular activities. Staff members learned to communicate through written notes or gestures when working near Wing D. I requested transfer to a different facility shortly after the Wing D inspection, primarily because I had difficulty accepting that psychiatric treatment could continue for patients who had officially completed their care or died while receiving treatment elsewhere. My replacement, Officer David Stone, reported that Wing D's patient census had increased to include several former Riverside Psychiatric Hospital staff members who had retired or transferred to other positions. According to the wing's medical records, these staff members required psychiatric treatment for occupational transition disorders and were receiving appropriate care from the Wing D medical team. I've learned that some psychiatric treatment facilities operate independently of official patient admission and discharge procedures, and sometimes the most effective mental health care is provided in units that exist parallel to conventional hospital operations. My name is David Park, and I worked as head of security at Valley Memorial Hospital for 8 years before accepting a position in emergency management consulting. This report documents an incident that occurred on February 23, 2022, based on emergency system logs, maintenance records, and incident documentation that was subsequently classified as equipment malfunction resolved. Valley Memorial Hospital is a 5-story facility built in 1985, with a roof level that houses mechanical equipment, helicopter landing pad, and emergency evacuation systems. The roof is accessible through 2 stairwells and contains various pieces of infrastructure, including ventilation systems, emergency generators, communication equipment, and fire safety systems. The hospital's fire alarm system consists of smoke detectors, heat sensors, sprinkler systems, and manual alarm stations throughout the facility. The system is designed to detect fire conditions and automatically notify the fire department while alerting hospital staff to evacuate patients and secure critical areas. The roof level contains specialized fire safety equipment, including emergency lighting, evacuation route markers, and a centralized alarm control system that coordinates fire safety responses throughout the hospital. The roof alarm systems are designed to operate independently from lower floor systems to ensure that fire safety protocols can be maintained even if other areas of the hospital are compromised. On February 23, 2022, at 3:17 a.m., the hospital's fire alarm system activated with signals indicating an emergency condition on the roof level. The alarm panels throughout the hospital showed roof-level fire alarm, activated with red warning lights and audible alerts that required immediate investigation. I responded to the alarm according to standard fire safety protocols, which required verification of the alarm condition, coordination with responding fire department personnel, and implementation of evacuation procedures if necessary. The hospital's automatic fire department notification system had already contacted emergency services, and fire trucks were en route to the facility. I accessed the roof through the east stairwell, equipped with portable fire extinguisher, emergency radio, and flashlight for roof-level investigation. The stairwell alarm system continued to indicate active fire conditions on the roof, with emergency lighting activated and evacuation signals directing traffic away from the roof area. When I opened the roof access door, I was met with intense flashing red lights from the fire alarm system and a loud siren that was much more powerful than the standard fire alarm sounds used throughout the rest of the hospital. Though the roof-level siren was designed for outdoor use and was significantly louder than necessary for building evacuation, it seemed designed to alert areas far beyond the hospital grounds. But despite the intense alarm activity, I found no signs of fire on the roof. No smoke, no flames, no heat signatures that would indicate fire conditions. The roof appeared normal, with all mechanical equipment operating properly and no visible emergency conditions. The fire alarm control panel on the roof showed that the alarm had been triggered by manual activation rather than automatic fire detection. Someone had deliberately activated the emergency alarm system, but no authorized personnel were present. On the roof during the night shift, I conducted a thorough inspection of the roof area to determine what might have caused the manual alarm activation and to ensure that no fire conditions existed anywhere on the roof level. During this inspection, I discovered something that was completely out of place for a hospital roof. In the center of the roof, positioned directly under the main fire alarm siren, was a hospital stretcher. The stretcher appeared to be standard medical equipment used for patient transport, but it was configured in an unusual way that suggested it was being used for patient restraint rather than transport. The stretcher's safety straps were tightly secured, buckled to their maximum constraint positions as if they were restraining a patient. But the stretcher was empty. No patient was visible on the stretcher, yet the straps were configured exactly as they would be if someone was lying on the stretcher and required restraint to prevent movement or escape. The stretcher's position directly under the fire alarm siren suggested that whoever had been restrained on the stretcher was intended to be exposed to the full intensity of the alarm system's audio and visual signals. The positioning seemed deliberate, as if the stretcher had been placed to maximize the impact of the emergency alarm on whoever might have been restrained there. I documented the stretcher's position and configuration with photographs, then used my radio to report the unusual discovery to the main security desk. Officer Janet Miller, who was monitoring the facility during the night shift, acknowledged my report and indicated that no medical staff had reported missing stretcher equipment or any need for roof-level medical procedures. While I was photographing the stretcher, I noticed that the fire alarm siren was producing variations in its sound pattern that didn't match the standard emergency signal protocols. Instead of the consistent alarm tone designed for fire evacuation, the siren was creating a more complex audio pattern that seemed almost like communication attempts. The sound variations included different frequencies, durations, and intensities that formed patterns resembling Morse code or other signaling systems. The audio patterns repeated in cycles, suggesting that the siren was attempting to transmit a specific message, rather than simply alerting people to emergency conditions. Attempted to decode the audio patterns by timing the different tones and frequencies. After approximately 15 minutes of analysis, I realized that the siren was repeating the same message continuously. Patient restraint protocol activated. Containment successful. Awaiting pickup. This message didn't correspond to any fire safety protocols or emergency procedures used by Valley Memorial Hospital. The language suggested medical or security operations rather than fire evacuation, and the reference to patient restraint and containment implied activities that wouldn't normally occur on a hospital roof. Contacted the hospital's medical supervisor to report the message being transmitted by the roof fire alarm and to inquire about any patient restraint protocols that might involve roof-level procedures. The medical supervisor, Dr. Elizabeth Chen, confirmed that no medical procedures involving patient restraint were conducted on the hospital roof, and that the roof area was not equipped or authorized for patient care activities. Dr. Chen also confirmed that no hospital stretchers were missing from patient care areas and that no medical staff had reported taking equipment to the roof level for any purpose. The fire department arrived at approximately 3:45 a.m. to investigate the fire alarm activation. Fire Captain Robert Hayes and his team conducted a comprehensive inspection of the roof area to determine the cause of the alarm and ensure that no fire conditions existed. Captain Hayes was also puzzled by the stretcher positioned under the fire alarm siren. The fire department's inspection protocols didn't include evaluation of medical equipment, but the stretcher's presence and configuration suggested that it might be related to the fire alarm activation. When Captain Hayes approached the stretcher to examine it more closely, the fire alarm siren immediately stopped. The sudden silence was startling after the intense audio assault that had been continuing for over 30 minutes. The red warning lights also stopped flashing, and all fire alarm indicators returned to normal status. But as soon as Captain Hayes moved away from the stretcher, the fire alarm system reactivated. The siren resumed its intense sound pattern, the red lights began flashing again, and the emergency indicators showed active fire conditions on the roof. This pattern repeated several times. The fire alarm would stop when someone approached the stretcher closely, but would reactivate when the person moved away. The stretcher seemed to be functioning as some kind of control mechanism for the fire alarm system, though there was no visible connection between the stretcher and the alarm equipment. Captain Hayes decided to test this apparent connection by touching the stretcher directly. When he placed his hand on the stretcher's frame, the fire alarm system stopped completely and remained silent. But when he tried to move the stretcher or adjust its position, the alarm system activated more intensely than before. "I've never seen fire alarm equipment that responds to medical equipment," Captain Hayes told me. "This stretcher isn't connected to the alarm system in any way I can identify, but it's clearly affecting the system's operation." The fire department completed their inspection and determined that no fire conditions existed on the roof. They documented the alarm activation as equipment malfunction and recommended that the hospital's maintenance department investigate the apparent interaction between the stretcher and the fire alarm system. But when Captain Hayes and his team prepared to leave the roof, they found that the stretcher's restraint straps had become tighter during their investigation. The straps were now secured more tightly than when I had first discovered the stretcher. as if someone had adjusted them while we were examining the fire alarm equipment. Most disturbing was the discovery that the stretcher now showed indentations in its padding, as if someone had been lying on it during our investigation. The indentations formed a clear human outline: head, torso, arms and legs, suggesting that an invisible person had been restrained on the stretcher while we were working around it. I touched one of the indentations in the stretcher's padding, and it felt warm, as if body heat was present despite no visible occupant. The padding compressed further under my touch, as if there was additional weight on the stretcher that wasn't visually apparent. When I placed my full hand on the stretcher's padding where the torso indentation was located, I could feel what seemed to be slow, steady breathing. The padding rose and fell slightly in a rhythm consistent with someone lying on the stretcher and breathing normally, though no person was visible. The fire alarm siren stopped completely when I maintained contact with the invisible occupant of the stretcher. As long as I kept my hand positioned where I could feel the breathing, the fire alarm system remained quiet, and all emergency indicators showed normal status. But I could also feel the invisible person attempting to communicate. Through the physical contact with the stretcher, I received impressions and information that suggested the person had been a patient at Valley Memorial Hospital who had died during a medical emergency on the roof. The patient had been brought to the roof by helicopter for emergency transport to a specialized medical facility, but had experienced cardiac arrest during the transfer process. The patient had been restrained on the stretcher for safety during the helicopter transport, but had died while waiting for the aircraft to arrive. The fire alarm activation was the patient's attempt to signal for help and alert medical staff that emergency assistance was still needed. The patient remained on the roof, restrained on the stretcher, waiting for the helicopter transport that had been scheduled but never completed due to the patient's death. The patient's message, transmitted through the physical contact with the stretcher, was a request that the scheduled helicopter transport be completed so that the patient could be taken to the specialized medical facility for treatment that might still be possible. I maintained contact with the invisible patient for approximately 10 minutes, receiving detailed information about the medical emergency that had brought them to the roof and the transport arrangements that had been interrupted by their death. The patient provided specific information about their medical condition, the specialized treatment they required, and the medical facility where they were supposed to receive care. When I removed my hand from the stretcher, the fire alarm system immediately reactivated with increased intensity. The siren was louder than before, the red lights flashed more rapidly, and the emergency indicators showed critical fire conditions throughout the hospital. Captain Hayes and I discussed the situation and agreed that the fire alarm activation would continue until the patient's request for helicopter transport was addressed. But neither the fire department nor the hospital had authority to arrange medical helicopter transport for a patient who had already died. Captain Hayes contacted his dispatch center to report the unusual situation and request guidance on how to resolve the fire alarm problem. The dispatch center had no protocols for dealing with fire alarms that were apparently activated by deceased patients requesting medical transport. I contacted Valley Memorial Hospital's administration to report the situation and request authorization for helicopter medical transport to resolve the emergency alarm activation. But hospital administration had no procedures for arranging transport for patients who were no longer officially under medical care. The fire alarm continued throughout the remainder of that shift and for the next several days. The hospital implemented emergency procedures to manage the continuous alarm activation, including notification of staff and patients that the roof alarm was experiencing technical difficulties and should be ignored. But the continuous fire alarm created significant operational problems for the hospital. Emergency services responded repeatedly to investigate the alarm activation, causing disruption and resource allocation issues. Patient care was affected by the constant emergency alerts, and staff members were distracted by the ongoing crisis indicators. After 5 days of continuous fire alarm activation, hospital administration decided to arrange helicopter medical transport for the deceased patient as requested. A medical helicopter was scheduled to land on the hospital roof and transport the invisible patient to the specialized medical facility that had been the original destination. On February 28, 2022, at 3:17 a.m., exactly 5 days after the initial alarm activation, the medical helicopter arrived at Valley Memorial Hospital. The flight crew was briefed on the unusual situation and agreed to conduct the transport procedure as if a patient was present on the stretcher. When the helicopter landed on the roof, the fire alarm siren stopped immediately. The stretcher's restraint straps loosened to normal positions, and the indentations in the padding disappeared as if the invisible patient had sat up to prepare for transport. The helicopter crew conducted standard patient loading procedures, carefully transferring the empty stretcher into the aircraft and securing it according to medical transport protocols. Throughout the loading process, the fire alarm system remained quiet and all emergency indicators showed normal status. The helicopter departed at 3:47 a.m., transporting the empty stretcher to the specialized medical facility that had been the patient's intended destination. After the helicopter's departure, the hospital roof returned to normal conditions with no fire alarm activity and no unusual equipment or indentations. The specialized medical facility contacted Valley Memorial Hospital the next day to confirm that they had received the patient transport and that appropriate medical care was being provided. According to their records, the patient had arrived in stable condition and was responding well to the specialized treatment protocols. But Valley Memorial Hospital's patient records showed no transport had occurred, no patient had been discharged to the specialized facility, and no helicopter medical transport had been arranged through official hospital procedures. I submitted a final report documenting the roof fire alarm incident and the resolution through helicopter medical transport. The report was classified as equipment malfunction resolved, with a note that the roof fire alarm system had been repaired and was functioning normally. The stretcher that had been transported by helicopter was never returned to Valley Memorial Hospital, and no insurance claims or billing issues resulted from the transport arrangement. The incident was closed without any official record of patient transport or medical care provided. I accepted a position in emergency management consulting shortly after the roof alarm incident, primarily because I realized that some medical emergencies continue to require attention even after conventional medical intervention is no longer possible. My replacement, Officer Michael Walsh, reported that the hospital roof occasionally shows evidence of helicopter landings during night hours, with landing pad lights activating and rotor wash effects, but no helicopters are visible during these events. I've learned that some emergency alarms are designed to summon assistance for situations that exist beyond the boundaries of conventional medical care, and sometimes the most important emergency responses are the ones that don't appear in official incident reports. My name is Thomas Richards, and this is my final report as Night Security Supervisor at Metropolitan General Hospital. I am documenting these events not for official review, but because I need to establish a record of what actually occurred during my last shift on March 15, 2023. The hospital's administrative records show that I completed my duties and left the facility at 7 a.m. that morning, but I know I never left Metropolitan General Hospital. I had worked at Metropolitan General for 12 years, the last 6 as Night Security Supervisor, responsible for coordinating security operations during 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shifts. My duties included patrol scheduling, incident response, coordination with medical staff during emergencies, and supervision of night security personnel. March 15, 2023 began as a routine shift. I arrived at 10:45 p.m. for the standard 15-minute briefing with the evening security supervisor, received updates on any issues from the day shift, and reviewed the night patrol schedule. The facility was operating normally with typical patient census and no unusual security concerns. The night security team consisted of 4 officers: Patricia Stone, covering the 1st and 2nd floors, Michael Hayes patrolling the 3rd and 4th floors, Janet Miller monitoring the emergency department and outpatient areas, and David Foster assigned to basement levels and mechanical areas. I maintained overall coordination from the main security office while conducting supervisory rounds throughout the facility. At 11:30 p.m., I began my first supervisory patrol, checking with each officer to ensure their assigned areas were secure and that no assistance was needed. All officers reported normal conditions with no security concerns or unusual activity. During my patrol, I reviewed the security systems, checked access control logs, and verified that all restricted areas remained properly secured. The hospital's operations appeared completely normal, with standard night shift activities throughout all departments. At 1:15 a.m., while I was conducting my second supervisory round, I received a radio call from dispatch. The voice on the radio was clearly identifiable as mine, same vocal patterns, same slight accent, same breathing characteristics, but I was not transmitting anything at the time. Unit 1, this is dispatch, the voice said, using my own voice to identify itself as the dispatch center. Do not finish your patrol. Return to the security office immediately. This was highly unusual. I was Unit 1, the supervisory position, and dispatch communications normally came from the hospital's central communications center, not from security personnel using their own radio call signs to identify themselves as dispatch. I attempted to respond to the call, pressing my radio's transmit button and speaking into the microphone. Dispatch Unit 1 responding. Please clarify your last transmission. But when I transmitted, no sound came from my radio. I could feel the radio vibrating as if it was transmitting. The display showed active transmission indicators, but no audio was generated. My radio appeared to be functioning normally, except that it produced no sound when I attempted to use it. The radio call from dispatch continued, still using my own voice. Unit 1, patrol termination is mandatory. Do not investigate current patrol objectives. Return to base immediately for shift conclusion procedures. The language was formal and procedural, similar to standard security communications, but the phrasing was unusual. Shift conclusion procedures was not terminology used in our normal operations, and patrol termination suggested emergency conditions that would require immediate cessation of security activities. I decided to return to the security office as instructed, both to investigate the unusual radio communications and to use the office's landline telephone to contact the hospital's central communications center for clarification. But as I walked toward the security office, I encountered something that fundamentally changed my understanding of the situation. In the corridor leading to the security office, I met myself walking in the opposite direction. The other version of myself was wearing an identical security uniform, carrying the same equipment and moving with the same gait and posture that I recognized as my own. When we approached each other in the corridor, the other version stopped and looked directly at me. Your shift is over, the other version said, using my exact voice. I'll be completing the remaining patrol duties. You can go home now. I attempted to respond, to ask what was happening and how there could be two versions of myself in the same location, but again, my voice produced no sound. I could feel myself speaking, could sense the air moving through my vocal cords, but no audible communication was generated. The other version of myself continued. The hospital security logs will show that you completed your shift normally and departed at 7 a.m. Your time card will reflect standard hours worked. Your duties have been satisfactorily completed. The other version then walked past me, continuing toward the area where I had been conducting my patrol. I watched myself walk away, observing my own movement patterns, uniform configuration, and equipment positioning. From an external perspective, I proceeded to the security office to investigate the situation further and to attempt communication with the central dispatch center using landline telephone systems. But when I reached the security office, I found that it was occupied by another version of myself sitting at the supervisory desk and conducting normal security operations. This third version of myself was reviewing security monitors, updating patrol logs, and performing the standard administrative duties associated with the night security supervisor position. The version at the desk appeared to be conducting routine operations without any awareness of unusual circumstances. I attempted to enter the security office, but encountered an invisible barrier at the doorway that prevented me from entering the room. I could see clearly into the office, could observe the other version of myself working at the desk, but could not physically enter the space. The version of myself at the desk looked up and made eye contact with me at the doorway. "The office is currently occupied," he said, using my voice. "Your replacement has assumed supervisory duties. Your shift has concluded." I tried to speak, to explain that I was the actual security supervisor and that multiple versions of myself represented an impossible situation. But my voice still produced no audible sound. I decided to contact other security officers to report the unusual situation and request assistance in understanding what was occurring. Using my radio, I attempted to call Officer Patricia Stone, who was patrolling the first and second floors. "Unit 2, this is Unit 1, I transmitted, though no sound was generated by my radio. "Please respond for supervisory check-in." Officer Stone's voice came through the radio clearly. "Unit 1, Unit 2 responding. All areas secure, no incidents to report. Will you be completing final rounds as scheduled?" But I hadn't asked about final rounds, and I couldn't hear my own transmission to know what Stone was responding to. It seemed that Stone was hearing radio communications from me that I wasn't aware of making. I attempted to explain the situation to Stone. "Unit 2, I need you to respond to the security office for emergency assistance. There appears to be an unauthorized person in the office using my identity." Stone's response suggested she was hearing something completely different. "Copy. Unit 1, confirming that you're completing shift transition procedures and that the new supervisor will be assuming duties. Everything appears normal from my position." The radio communications indicated that other security officers were interacting with someone they believed to be me, but who was apparently providing different information than what I was attempting to transmit. I decided to locate Officer Stone directly to discuss the situation face to face and determine what radio communications she was actually receiving. According to her patrol schedule, she should have been in the first floor medical units area. When I found Officer Stone, she was conducting routine security checks and appeared to be operating normally. But when I approached her to discuss the radio communications problem, she looked through me as if I wasn't present. "Officer Stone," I said, though no sound was produced. Stone continued her patrol activities without any acknowledgement of my presence. I waved my arms, positioned myself directly in front of her, and attempted various methods to get her attention. But Stone showed no awareness that I was present. She walked through the same corridors, conducted the same security checks, and performed the same duties as if I wasn't there. But while I was attempting to communicate with Stone, I heard radio traffic between her and someone she identified as Unit 1. "Unit 1, this is Unit 2, completing first floor rounds. Everything appears normal. Confirm final check-in procedures for shift conclusion." The response came through Stone's radio in my voice. "Unit 2, Unit 1 acknowledging. Proceed with final patrol sequence. Shift transition will occur at 700 hours as scheduled." Someone using my voice and radio call sign was maintaining normal communications with the security team, but I was not the source of those communications. I attempted to locate the other security officers to determine if they were experiencing similar communication anomalies. Officer Michael Hayes was assigned to the 3rd and 4th floors, and according to the patrol schedule, should have been accessible for supervisory check-in. When I found Hayes, he was also unable to see or hear me. He continued his patrol duties while maintaining radio communications with someone he believed to be me, but showed no awareness of my actual presence. The same pattern occurred with Officers Miller and Foster. All security personnel were conducting normal operations, maintaining standard radio communications with their supervisor, and reporting routine security status. But none of them could detect my presence when I attempted direct interaction. From their perspective, the night shift was proceeding normally under my supervision. From my perspective, I had become invisible and inaudible to my own security team, while other versions of myself had assumed my duties and identity. At 3:30 a.m., I received another radio call from dispatch, again using my own voice. "Unit 1, this is dispatch, confirming that shift transition procedures are in progress. Please verify your current location for personnel records." I attempted to respond, but as before my radio produced no audible transmission. The dispatch voice continued. Unit 1 showing your location as security office, conducting final administrative duties. Shift conclusion scheduled for 700 hours. But I was not in the security office, and I was not conducting administrative duties. I was standing in a corridor on the 3rd floor, unable to communicate with my security team and observing other versions of myself performing my job. Responsibilities. I returned to the security office to observe the version of myself who was handling supervisory duties. The office version was completing paperwork, updating security logs, and performing all the standard end-of-shift administrative tasks that I would normally handle. The security logs being updated by the office version showed normal patrol activities, routine security checks, and standard incident reports for the night shift. According to the logs, I had conducted supervisory rounds, maintained communications with all security officers, and handled minor issues that required security attention. But I had no memory of the activities documented in the security logs, and many of the logged events had occurred while I was attempting to understand the multiple versions situation. Most significantly, the security logs showed that I had conducted final rounds of the hospital and completed all supervisory duties at 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the end of my shift. The logs indicated that I had departed the hospital at 7 a.m. as scheduled, but it was currently only 4:15 a.m., and I had not conducted final rounds or completed any end-of-shift procedures. At 5:02 a.m., the version of myself in the security office stood up, gathered personal belongings and prepared to leave. The version walked to the time clock system and punched out, officially ending the shift at exactly 7 a.m. according to the time clock display. Though the actual time was 5 a.m., the version then walked toward the hospital's main exit, moving with normal gait and posture. I followed this version to observe the departure process and determine what would happen when my shift officially ended. At the main exit, the version of myself badged out using the security access system spoke briefly with the morning security supervisor, who was arriving for day shift, and walked to the employee parking area. The version got into my car, started the engine, and drove away from the hospital. But I remained in the hospital lobby, watching my car drive away with someone who appeared to be me, but who was not me. The morning security supervisor, Officer Rebecca Walsh, entered the hospital and approached me in the lobby. But like the night shift officers, Walsh showed no awareness of my presence. She walked through the lobby, conducted her standard arrival procedures, and began day shift operations as if I wasn't there. I attempted to follow my normal departure routine, walking to the employee exit and attempting to badge out using my security access card. But the access system showed no response to my card, as if it wasn't being scanned by the reader. I tried the employee parking area to see if my car had somehow returned, but the parking space was empty. According to witnesses and security systems, I had departed in my car at 7 a.m., but I remained in the hospital with no means of departure. Throughout the day shift, I continued to explore the hospital, attempting to understand my situation and find ways to communicate with staff members or resolve the apparent duplication of my identity. But as the day progressed, I realized that I had become a permanent part of Metropolitan General Hospital in a way that didn't correspond to official employment or standard presence. I could observe all hospital operations, move through all areas of the facility, and witness all activities, but I could not participate in or influence any aspect of the hospital's functions. During the following night shift, a new security supervisor was assigned to my former position. The new supervisor conducted the same duties I had performed, supervised the same security officers, and maintained the same operational procedures. But I remained in the hospital, continuing to observe security operations and attempting to understand why I had been replaced by other versions of myself who could perform my duties while I became invisible to the hospital's normal operations. Over the following weeks, I discovered that Metropolitan General Hospital contained many individuals in similar situations, former employees who remained in the facility after their official departure, patients who continued to occupy rooms after their discharge or death, and staff members who existed parallel to the hospital's documented personnel. We formed an unofficial community of individuals who existed within the hospital but outside its official operations. We could observe and interact with each other, but remained invisible to the people who officially worked at or visited the facility. I learned that the hospital maintained parallel operations that served both its documented functions and its undocumented population. Medical care was provided to patients who existed beyond official admission records. Security services protected areas that weren't on building plans, and administrative functions managed resources for activities that didn't appear in budget reports. My final radio call had been accurate. I had been instructed not to finish my patrol because my official duties were concluded. Other versions of myself had assumed responsibility for the documented security operations, while I had become part of the hospital's parallel community that existed between the official and unofficial aspects of Metropolitan General's functions. The hospital's records correctly show that my employment ended on March 15, 2023, and that I departed the facility at 7 a.m. that morning. But I know I never left Metropolitan General Hospital, and I continue to observe and document its operations from a perspective that exists beyond the boundaries of conventional employment relationships. Some hospitals employ staff members who work shifts that don't appear on official schedules, and sometimes the most important security duties are performed by officers who don't exist in personnel records.